the most famous passages in all of philosophy, David Hume in 1739 looked inside his mind in an attempt to find his self. He tried to find some enduring presence that persisted through the flow of experience, and he claimed to find no such thing. All he could find was a rapid succession of images and momentary passion. He wrote, and I quote, "I always stumble on some particular perception or other, of heat or cold, light or shade, love or hatred, pain or pleasure. I never can catch myself at any time without a perception, and never can observe anything but the perception." So David Hume was clearly not a meditator, if you ask me. Anyway, he was inspired by Isaac Newton, whose theories in physics were shared 50 years earlier. Newton saw the world as tiny objects ruled by laws of motion and a principle of attraction between them, which is gravity. Hume aimed at an explanation of the same kind, but of the contents of the mind. He wanted to discover a force of gravity between sensory impressions and ideas. Around 2 centuries later, the American philosopher John Dewey remarked, "It is altogether likely that the ideas which Hume found in constant flux whenever he looked within himself were a succession of words silently uttered." So perhaps David Hume was referring to that inner monologue that we all have with ourselves, and often at the cost of our sanity. I would like to mention another figure who is actually very underrated. His name is Lev Vygotsky, and he grew up in the early days of the Soviet Union, so a lot of his theories were developed within the Marxist context. He thought that as a child developed and progressed from simple responses to complex thought, a transition takes place through the internalization of the medium of speech. Ordinary speech, saying things and hearing them, plays an organizational role in our lives. So Vygotsky thought that as children learn through spoken language, they also acquire inner speech, which has its own patterns and rhythms. So a child's language branches into outer and inner forms. Around 1930, Vygotsky suffered from a severe personal and intellectual crisis and began revising all of his theories, and he was also accused of bourgeois elements in his work. He died young at the age of 37, and his book Thought and Language was translated into English for the first time in 1962. So this prompts a very important thought experiment. What is the psychological role of language? In particular, what is the role of all that chattering, rambling internal speech? So it's very important to mention Charles Darwin in this thought experiment, because Charles Darwin, in his book The Descent of Man, Darwin claimed that speech, inner and outer, is important for complex thought. So complex thought must require language or something close to it. However, it's important to mention another figure in the realm of psychology. His name is Wolfgang Kohler, and he's a German psychologist. He studied chimps for 4 years in the Canary Islands, and he discovered that chimps, their language isn't complex, yet their internal processes are very complex. And he weakened the idea that language is the medium for complex thought. So what do you guys think? Like, really think about it. Would we have inner speech without language?